At lunch, my daughter-in-law whispered, "If it weren't for you, this family would have a much better life." I just finished my plate. A week later, the bank froze the account she used the most, on my request. I hadn't planned it this way. For 15 years, I'd endured Rebecca's subtle digs, her cold smiles, her way of making me feel like an intruder in my own family. But something about that whispered comment, delivered while my son Thomas passed the salt to my grandson, finally broke something inside me. The dining room had been filled with the usual Sunday chatter. Thomas was proudly describing his promotion at work. The boys were arguing about baseball statistics, and I'd brought my homemade apple pie, the one Thomas had loved since childhood. Everything seemed normal, until Rebecca leaned over while the boys were distracted. Her perfectly manicured nails tapped against her water glass as she leaned toward me, her voice just low enough that only I could hear. "If it weren't for you, this family would have a much better life." Before we continue, comment where you're watching from and subscribe to the channel. We'd love to see how far our stories are reaching. I froze, fork midway to my mouth. My hand trembled slightly, but I managed to finish my bite, chewing slowly, swallowing past the sudden tightness in my throat. Decades of practiced composure kept my expression neutral as I set down my fork and dabbed at my lips with a napkin. "Mom, are you okay?" Thomas asked, noticing my silence. "Just fine, dear," I replied, forcing a smile. "Just thinking about how proud I am of your promotion." Rebecca's eyes narrowed slightly, that familiar look of calculation crossing her face before she turned to Thomas with a brilliant smile. "We should celebrate properly, honey. Maybe that trip to Napa we've been talking about?" Thomas shifted uncomfortably. "Well, we should probably wait until things settle down financially." "Oh, Thomas," Rebecca cut in, placing her hand over his. "You work so hard. You deserve this. We'll make it work." Her voice had that special quality, half syrupy sweetness, half steel, that I'd watched her perfect over the years. It was the voice that always got her way, that always made Thomas doubt himself. I watched my son's resolve crumble under her touch. He'd always been sensitive, always eager to please. Since marrying Rebecca, that quality had intensified. He seemed constantly caught between wanting to make everyone happy and fearing he was failing at it. "Maybe you're right," he conceded with a small smile. "I always am," Rebecca replied with a wink, before shooting me a triumphant glance. That night, I couldn't sleep. Rebecca's words kept echoing in my mind. "If it weren't for you, this family would have a much better life." I stared at the ceiling of my modest apartment, the same one I'd moved into after selling my house to help Thomas and Rebecca with the down payment on their beautiful colonial 5 years ago. I'd given them nearly everything. My retirement savings had paid for their wedding when Rebecca insisted on something grander than they could afford. My husband Harold's life insurance had covered Thomas's student loans. And when they'd found their forever home but couldn't quite manage the down payment, I'd sold the house where I'd raised my son, where Harold and I had built our life, telling myself it was an investment in my family's happiness. "You could live with us, Mom," Thomas had offered, but the quick flash of panic in Rebecca's eyes had told me everything. I found the apartment instead, assuring them it was what I wanted. Where did I go wrong? I whispered to Harold's photograph on my nightstand. My late husband would have known what to do. He'd always been the backbone of our family, the one who could see through pretenses. The next morning, I made a decision. I would check my financial statements, something I'd been neglecting lately, allowing Rebecca to help manage some of my accounts since she had such a good head for money. What I found sent a chill through me. Regular transfers from my accounts to an unfamiliar one. Credit card charges I didn't recognize. Loan documents with my signature. A signature that looked close to mine but wasn't. I spent the next few days gathering evidence. Bank statements, credit reports, loan documents. By Friday, I had a clear picture and it was devastating. Rebecca hadn't just been helping. She'd been systematically draining my accounts. The trip to Napa wouldn't be the first luxury she'd financed with my money while telling Thomas they were struggling financially. My hands shook as I drove to the bank, a folder of documents beside me. Mrs. Schultz, the manager who had known me for 20 years, listened gravely as I explained the situation. "I'm so sorry, Martha," she said, patting my hand. "Financial elder. Abuse is more common than people realize, especially from family members." The word stung. Elder abuse. Was that what this was? I was 70, yes, but I'd never thought of myself as vulnerable. I'd been a nurse for 40 years, had helped deliver babies and comfort the dying. I'd raised my son alone after Harold's heart attack. I wasn't helpless. Yet here I was, betrayed by the woman my son loved, the mother of my grandchildren. "What would you like me to do, Martha?" Mrs. Schultz asked gently. I took a deep breath, straightening my spine. "I want to freeze the account that's receiving these transfers, and I want to change the access permissions on all my accounts." "Are you sure? This might cause family conflict." I thought of Rebecca's whisper, of the years of subtle undermining, of how she manipulated Thomas with that mixture of guilt and affection that left him constantly seeking her approval. "I'm sure," I said firmly. "It's time for the truth to come out." As I drove home, I felt a strange mixture of dread and relief. Rebecca would be furious when she discovered what I'd done. Thomas would be caught in the middle. My grandchildren might be kept from me. But for the first time in years, I felt like I was standing up for myself, for the woman Harold had loved, for the mother Thomas had once admired. Whatever came next, I would face it with the dignity I'd abandoned for far too long. What I didn't know then was just how deep Rebecca's deception went, or how much it would cost us all before the truth was fully revealed. The next morning, I woke to 6 missed calls from Rebecca. I knew the bank must have notified her about the freeze. My hand trembled slightly as I set my phone down without returning her calls. Instead, I made myself a cup of tea and sat by my window, watching the early spring rain patter against the glass. 15 years. That's how long Rebecca had been in our lives. I still remember the day Thomas brought her home, her perfect smile, designer clothes, and the way she complimented everything in my house while her eyes calculated its value. I'd ignored the warning bells then, so happy to see Thomas in love after his heartbreak with Sarah, the kind kindergarten teacher he'd dated in college. "You'll adore Rebecca, Mom," Thomas had said. "She's amazing with numbers. Works for that big investment firm downtown." I'd tried to love her, for Thomas's sake. When they announced their engagement 6 months later, I threw myself into helping plan the wedding. But even then, there were signs. "Thomas and I want something special," Rebecca had said during our first wedding planning lunch. "Not some budget affair." "Well, I've set aside some money for Thomas's wedding," I'd offered. "It's not a fortune, but—" "That's so sweet," Rebecca interrupted, patting my hand. "But we were thinking of something a bit more elegant. The Westbrook Hotel has this gorgeous ballroom." The Westbrook was the most expensive venue in town. I'd seen Thomas's face tighten with worry. "Becca, we talked about this. I don't think we can afford—" "Oh, Thomas," she'd said with that special laugh, the one that somehow made him feel both loved and slightly foolish. "Don't worry so much. We'll figure it out." By the time she'd finished her pitch, complete with talk about once-in-a-lifetime moments and starting their marriage off right, Thomas was nodding along. And I'd opened my checkbook, wanting my son to be happy, wanting this woman to welcome me into their life. That had been the pattern ever since. Rebecca wanting more than they could afford, Thomas hesitating, Rebecca making him feel guilty for his practicality, and often me stepping in to help, always with Rebecca's knowledge, rarely with her gratitude. The worst had been the house. They'd been married 10 years when Rebecca decided their starter home wasn't enough anymore. "The schools in Oak Ridge are so much better," she'd explained over dinner at my house. "And we need more space for the boys. Don't we deserve to give them the best, Thomas?" Thomas, always the responsible one, had looked uncomfortable. "The mortgage would be a stretch, Becca. Maybe in a few years, Jamie will be halfway through school already," she'd countered, her voice taking on that edge that made Thomas shrink slightly in his chair. "Do you want to be the reason he doesn't get into a good college?" I'd watched my son's face fall, watched him assume this burden of guilt. Before I could stop myself, I'd spoken up. I could help with the down payment. Both had turned to me. Thomas, with surprise, Rebecca with a quickly hidden flash of triumph. "Mom, no, we couldn't ask you to—" "Don't be silly, Thomas," Rebecca had cut in. "If your mother wants to help her grandchildren, we should let her. It's what family does." A week later, I'd listed my house, the one Harold and I had bought when Thomas was just a baby, the one where I'd raised him after Harold's sudden death when Thomas was only 12, the house where I'd kept all my memories. "You'll come live with us, of course," Thomas had insisted. I'd seen the panic flash across Rebecca's face before she'd smoothed it into a smile. "Of course," she'd echoed. But later, she'd taken me aside. "Thomas means well," she'd said, "but you'd be so cramped in our guest room. And you've always valued your independence. I found some lovely senior apartments not far from us. And so I'd ended up here, in this one-bedroom apartment, surrounded by the few keepsakes I'd kept from my old life. I'd told myself it was worth it to see my grandchildren grow up in a beautiful neighborhood with good schools. I told myself that the coldness I sometimes felt from Rebecca was just my imagination. But it wasn't just my imagination that had Rebecca gradually taking over my financial affairs. "You shouldn't have to worry about these things at your age," she'd said when offering to help manage my accounts. "I do this professionally, after all." At first, it had been small things, helping me set up automatic payments, suggesting investments. Then came the joint account for emergencies. Then her name on my credit cards as an authorized user, just in case. Thomas had encouraged it. "You're lucky, Mom. Rebecca handles all our finances too. She's brilliant at it." I'd tried to ignore how Thomas never seemed to know exactly how much money they had, or how Rebecca would dodge his questions with, "Don't worry about it, honey. I've got it handled." My tea had gone cold as these memories washed over me. My phone buzzed again. Thomas this time. I hesitated, then answered. "Mom? What's going on? Rebecca says there's some problem with the bank." My heart ached at the confusion in his voice. "Thomas, we need to talk, but not over the phone. Can you come by? Alone?" "Alone? Mom, you're scaring me." Rebecca says, "Please, Thomas, trust me." A long pause. I could almost see him running his hand through his hair the way he did when stressed. "Okay, I'll come by after work." I spent the day preparing. I organized all the bank statements, the credit card bills, the loan documents. I made copies of everything. And I steeled myself for what was to come. Thomas arrived at 5:30, his tie loosened, worry etched on his face. "Rebecca's furious, Mom. She says you froze her account." "Not her account, Thomas. My account. Please, sit down." Confusion clouded his features as he lowered himself onto my couch. "What do you mean, your account?" I took a deep breath and began to explain. I showed him the statements, the transfers, the credit card charges for luxury items and vacations that Rebecca had told him they couldn't afford. I showed him the loans in my name, with forged signatures. "That can't be right," he said, shaking his head. "Rebecca wouldn't. She couldn't." "She did, Thomas. Over $200,000 in the past 5 years alone." The color drained from his face. "But we've been struggling to pay our mortgage. She's been saying we need to cut back, that we might need to ask you for another loan soon. While she's been taking shopping trips to New York, while she has a secret account with over $50,000 in it." Thomas stared at the documents, his hands shaking. "I don't understand. Why would she lie to me?" I reached for his hand. "There's more, Thomas. It's not just about the money." I showed him something else I'd discovered while digging through my records. Emails Rebecca had sent to my grandchildren's school using my email account. Emails canceling my attendance at school events, claiming I was too tired or not feeling well. Emails I'd never written. "She's been keeping me away from the boys, Thomas, making them think I don't want to be involved." Thomas's face crumpled. "Last Christmas, you didn't come to Jamie's recital. He was so hurt. Rebecca said you'd called to say you weren't up to it. I never knew about it. I was waiting at home for you all to pick me up as we'd planned." A tear slid down Thomas's cheek. "Mom, I'm so sorry. I had no idea." "She's very good at what she does, Thomas. She's kept us apart while making each of us think it was the other's choice." Thomas stood abruptly, pacing my small living room. "I need to talk to her. I need to hear her side." Fear gripped my heart. "Thomas, please be careful. She'll try to manipulate you. She always does." He looked at me then. Really looked at me, and for a moment I saw the boy who'd lost his father too young, who'd grown up trying to be the man of the house, who'd always taken care of me even when I was supposed to be caring for him. "I know, Mom. I'm starting to see that now." He picked up the folder of evidence. "Can I take this?" I nodded, and he bent to kiss my cheek. "I'll come back tomorrow. We'll figure this out." After he left, I sat in the growing darkness, not bothering to turn on the lights. I'd done what I needed to do. I'd shown Thomas the truth, but I couldn't shake the fear that Rebecca would find a way to twist things, to make him doubt what he'd seen with his own eyes. She'd done it before, countless times. My phone buzzed with a text from Rebecca. "You have no idea what you've done." I stared at those words, feeling their threat wrap around me like a cold hand. But instead of the fear I'd felt for so long, I felt something else stirring. A determination I thought I'd lost years ago. Whatever storm was coming, I would face it. For Thomas, for my grandchildren. For myself, what I didn't know then was that Rebecca's deception ran even deeper than financial abuse, and that the coming confrontation would reveal secrets that would change our family forever. I didn't sleep that night. Every creak in the apartment building made me start, half expecting Rebecca to appear at my door. By morning, I was exhausted but resolute. I called my oldest friend Doris, who lived 3 floors below me. "Martha, you should have told me sooner," she said after I explained everything over coffee at her kitchen table. Doris had been a paralegal for 40 years before retiring, and her practical mind was exactly what I needed. I was embarrassed, I admitted. I kept thinking I must be misunderstanding things, that I was being paranoid. Doris adjusted her glasses and examined the statements I'd brought. "This isn't paranoia. This is systematic. Look at these transfers, always just under $5,000, probably to avoid triggering bank notifications. Do you think Thomas will confront her?" Doris sighed. "He might try, but from what you've told me about this woman, she'll have a story ready. You need more evidence, something irrefutable." She was right. What I had proved Rebecca had been taking my money, but there were still gaps. Where had all that money gone? And what else had she been hiding? Doris helped me make a plan. First, we'd need to understand exactly how Rebecca had gained such control over Thomas. I'd watched it happen gradually over 15 years, but seeing it written out made the pattern undeniable. "It's classic manipulation," Doris said as we made a list. "Isolating him from supportive relationships, especially you, controlling information, creating financial dependency, making him doubt his own judgment." I remembered countless occasions where Thomas had expressed an opinion only to have Rebecca subtly undermine him. "Oh, honey," she'd say with that particular laugh, "you know that's not how it works." Or, "Remember what happened last time you made that decision?" She'd reference past failures that I had never witnessed, making Thomas doubt himself. "She uses his kindness against him," I said softly. "Thomas has always wanted to make people happy, ever since he was a little boy." "Manipulators target that quality," Doris confirmed. "Now let's focus on the financial trail." We spent hours tracking transactions, noting patterns. Rebecca had started small, a few $100s here and there from my accounts. Then larger transfers, always with plausible explanations if I happened to notice. "Oh, that was for Jamie's school trip." Or, "We prepaid some of your medical expenses." By mid-afternoon, we documented over $180,000 in unauthorized transfers over the past 3 years alone. But there was still a missing piece. "These transfers all go to the same account," Doris noted, pointing to the account number that appeared repeatedly. "But you don't have access to see where the money goes from there." "The bank wouldn't tell me," I said. "Privacy regulations." Doris tapped her pen against the table. "We need someone who can trace this further. I know just the person." That evening, we met with Michael Chen, a forensic accountant Doris knew from her legal days. In his small office downtown, he reviewed our documents while I nervously twisted Harold's wedding ring on my finger. "This is quite sophisticated," Michael said finally. "These transfers were structured to avoid detection. But there's a pattern here I've seen before." He explained that the account receiving my money appeared to be a pass-through, a temporary holding place before the funds were moved elsewhere. With my permission, he made some calls to contacts at several banks. 2 hours later, we had our answer. The money had been moving through 3 different accounts before landing in an offshore account in Rebecca's name only, not jointly with Thomas. "There's approximately $320,000 in that account," Michael said. "Far more than what we've traced from your accounts." My stomach dropped. Where did the rest come from? Michael's expression turned grim. "Without access to all her financial records? I can't be certain. But given the pattern, I'd suspect she's been diverting funds from your son's accounts as well." The thought made me sick. Thomas worked so hard at his engineering job, often taking on extra projects. Meanwhile, Rebecca had been telling him they were struggling financially, making him feel guilty for even small purchases for himself. I remembered last Christmas, when Thomas had wanted to buy a new fishing rod. "We really can't afford luxuries right now," Rebecca had said with a dramatic sigh. "Not with Jamie's orthodontist bills." Thomas had put the rod back, looking defeated. Had she been taking from him all along, while making him believe they were barely making ends meet? "There's something else," Michael said, interrupting my thoughts. "Recent activity shows a large withdrawal 3 weeks ago. $75,000 transferred to a real estate holding company. A quick, Search revealed the company was developing luxury condominiums downtown. Was Rebecca planning to leave? To take my grandchildren and disappear with all this money? My hands shook as I gathered the documents. I need to tell Thomas. Immediately. Be careful, Doris warned. Rebecca won't give up without a fight. I called Thomas that evening, asking him to come alone. He sounded hesitant. Rebecca thinks we should all talk together, Mom. Please, Thomas. Just you first. After a long pause, he agreed to stop by the next morning before work. I spent the night organizing all the evidence, making copies, preparing to show my son just how thoroughly he'd been deceived by the woman he loved. Thomas arrived at 7:30, looking tired and wary. Rebecca was upset I came alone, he said as he took off his jacket. She thinks you're trying to turn me against her. I'm trying to show you the truth, I replied, leading him to my dining table where the documents were neatly arranged. Please, just look at what I found. For the next hour, I walked him through everything. The unauthorized transfers from my accounts, the offshore account in Rebecca's name only, the recent withdrawal coinciding with the condominium development. Thomas's face grew paler with each revelation. This can't be right, he said, but his voice lacked conviction. There's more, I said gently, sliding over another folder. It's not just financial, Thomas. This folder contained evidence of how Rebecca had been controlling our relationship for years. Emails she'd sent from my account canceling plans with Thomas and the boys. Messages from Thomas that had been intercepted and deleted before I could see them. A calendar showing family events I'd never been told about, marked with notes like, "Don't forget to tell Martha the wrong time." Thomas stared at the evidence, his hands trembling slightly. Why? He whispered. Why would she do this? I reached across the table and took his hand. I think she's been isolating you, making you dependent on her. Have you noticed how few of your old friends you still see? How rarely you visit your cousins now? A look of realization crossed his face. She always has reasons why we can't go. Someone said something offensive, or the timing isn't good, or... And at home? I asked carefully. Do you have access to all the financial accounts? He looked down. Rebecca handles all that. She says I'm not good with money, that I just mess things up. He paused, then added quietly, she gets upset if I ask too many questions. My heart broke hearing how thoroughly my confident, intelligent son had been convinced of his own inadequacy. Thomas, look at me, I said firmly. You are not bad with money. You're not forgetful or socially awkward or any of the other things she might have told you. You're being manipulated by someone who's taking advantage of your kindness. For a moment, I saw a flash of the little boy who'd come to me with skinned knees and broken toys, trusting me to make things right. Then his expression hardened. I need to talk to her, he said, gathering the papers. I need to hear her explanation. Fear clutched at my heart. Thomas, please be careful. She'll try to twist this, to make you doubt yourself again. He stood, his jaw set. Not this time, Mom. I see the pattern now. He gestured to the documents. This is too clear to explain away. After he left, I sat at my empty dining table, both relieved and terrified. Thomas knew the truth now, but confronting, Rebecca would be dangerous. She'd built her entire life on these deceptions. She wouldn't give them up easily. My phone buzzed with a text from Thomas. Coming back tonight with Rebecca. She insists on talking to you. Be ready. I took a deep breath and called Doris. Whatever. Storm was coming. I wouldn't face it alone. What I couldn't know then was that Rebecca had one final, devastating manipulation planned. One that would test Thomas's newfound clarity and threaten to destroy what remained of our family forever. The next morning, Thomas and I reviewed financial statements at my kitchen table. The more we uncovered, the worse it looked. Rebecca hadn't just been stealing from me, she'd been systematically draining their joint accounts for years, all while making Thomas believe they were struggling financially. I don't understand, Thomas said, running his hand through his hair. We've been putting off vacations, driving old cars. Where did all this money go? The answer came later that day when Thomas's lawyer called. After obtaining emergency court orders to freeze all accounts associated with Rebecca, they discovered something shocking. A luxury apartment in New York, purchased 8 months ago, in Rebecca's maiden name. New York? Thomas repeated, his face pale. She doesn't know anyone in New York. But a quick search revealed that Eric Chambers, the real estate developer who'd received the $75,000 transfer from Rebecca's secret account, had recently opened a new office in Manhattan. I think she does know someone there, I said gently. Thomas was still processing this betrayal when his phone rang. It was Jamie, his oldest son, sounding upset. Dad? Mom's acting weird. She's packing our suitcases and saying we're going on a surprise trip, but she won't tell us where or call you. Thomas's face drained of color. Jamie, put your brother on another phone and go somewhere Mom can't hear you. After confirming the boys were alone, Thomas's voice remained calm despite his panic. Listen carefully, boys. I need you to stall Mom. Tell her you can't find something important. Don't get in the car with her. I'm coming home right now. After hanging up, Thomas called his lawyer, who promised to meet him at the house with a emergency custody order. Then he called the police to report Rebecca's attempt to flee with the children. I can't believe this is happening, he said, grabbing his keys. She'd really take the boys away from me? She's desperate, I replied, grabbing my purse. I'm coming with you. When we arrived at Thomas's house, Rebecca's car was already packed. Thomas rushed inside, with me following as quickly as my artificial knee would allow. You have no right, Rebecca was screaming in the living room. They're my children, too. You were going to take them without telling me, Thomas shot back, blocking her path to the stairs. Rebecca's eyes flashed with fury when she saw me. Of course she's here. Running to Mommy again, Thomas? Don't start, Rebecca, Thomas warned. The police are on their way, and my lawyer has already filed for emergency custody. Rebecca's laugh was brittle. On what grounds? Being a devoted mother who wanted to take her children on a trip. On grounds of financial fraud, attempted parental kidnapping, and documented psychological abuse, came a voice from the doorway. A tall woman in a crisp suit stood there. I'm Sarah Kendrick, Mr. Lindstrom's attorney, and you, Mrs. Lindstrom, are in serious trouble. Rebecca's composure cracked. This is ridiculous. You can't keep me from my children. Actually, we can, Sarah replied, holding up a document. This emergency order grants Mr. Lindstrom temporary sole custody pending a full hearing. The wail of police sirens seemed to finally penetrate Rebecca's denial. Her face contorted with rage as she turned to me. You, she hissed. This is all your fault. You couldn't stand that he loved me more than you. That's not true, I said, quietly. I only wanted Thomas and the boys to be happy. I don't need your approval, she spat. Do you know how pathetic you look? A lonely old woman clinging to her son because no one else wants her? Thomas stepped between us. That's enough, Rebecca. Don't speak to my mother that way. Rebecca's eyes widened, as if finally realizing she'd lost her hold over him. Her expression shifted, calculation replacing rage. Thomas, she said, her voice suddenly soft, vulnerable. Please don't do this. I know I've made mistakes, but I love you. We can work this out. I watched as she reached for him with that familiar gesture I'd seen countless times, the touch that usually preceded Thomas giving in. But Thomas stepped back, out of her reach. No, Rebecca. No more manipulation. No more lies. The police arrived then, along with Rebecca's hastily called attorney. Rebecca was served with restraining orders preventing her from accessing any financial accounts or removing the children from the county. By evening, a temporary arrangement had been reached. Rebecca would stay with her sister across town. Thomas and the boys would remain in the family home. A full hearing was scheduled for the following week. After the police left, Thomas sat with Jamie and Ethan in the living room, gently explaining what was happening. I stayed in the kitchen, giving them privacy, my heart breaking for my grandsons whose world had just been turned upside down. Later, after the boys went to bed, Thomas joined me at the kitchen table, his face lined with exhaustion. How are they? I asked. Confused. Upset. He sighed. Jamie had questions I couldn't answer. Ethan just wanted to know when Mom was coming home. I reached across the table and squeezed his hand. Children are resilient, Thomas. With love and honesty, they'll get through this. He nodded, then looked up at me with eyes full of regret. I should have listened to you years ago, Mom. All those times you tried to talk to me about Rebecca, she didn't want you to see it, I said gently. That's how manipulation works. Thomas was silent for a moment. Was any of it real? Did she ever really love me, or was I just useful to her? I don't know, Thomas, I admitted. But what I do know is that you loved her, truly. And you've been a wonderful father to those boys. That's what matters now. The day before the custody hearing, Thomas received a call from his lawyer. We found something you need to see immediately, Sarah said. Something about Rebecca's past. An hour later, we sat in Sarah's office staring at the documents spread across her desk. Rebecca Carlton isn't her original name, Sarah explained. She was born Rebecca Winters. She changed it legally when she was 22, right after her first husband divorced her. First husband? Thomas repeated, stunned. She told me I was her first marriage. Sarah nodded grimly. The first of 3, actually. Before you, she was married to David Carlton for 14 months. Before him, Gregory Peterson for just under 2 years. Thomas looked shell-shocked. She was married twice before me? How is that possible? She was only 28 when we met. She married young, Sarah said. And more importantly, she established a pattern. She slid forward several court documents. Both previous marriages ended with accusations of financial manipulation and emotional abuse. Both men claimed she isolated them from family and friends, controlled their finances, and then attempted to leave with substantial assets. There's more, Sarah continued. The real estate developer, Eric Chambers, is married with children. He and Rebecca have been involved for approximately 18 months, according to electronic communications we've obtained. He recently told his wife he's leaving her. Thomas closed his eyes briefly, absorbing this fresh betrayal. When he opened them, there was new resolve in his expression. I want everything on record for the hearing, he said firmly. Every detail of her past marriages, her relationship with Chambers, the financial fraud, all of it. On the morning of the hearing, I sat with Thomas in the courthouse hallway. Rebecca arrived looking immaculate in a conservative navy dress, her expression a perfect blend of dignity and subtle suffering. She nodded coolly at Thomas, then turned to me, her eyes hard despite her composed expression. I hope you're satisfied, she said quietly. You've finally gotten what you wanted, destroying my family. Before I could respond, the courtroom doors opened. As we filed in, I thought about her words. Had I wanted this? The pain in my grandson's eyes, the devastation on my son's face? No. What I had wanted was for Thomas to see the truth, for my grandchildren to grow up in a home without manipulation and lies, for our family to be based on love and honesty, not control and deception. As the judge entered and the hearing began, I knew that whatever happened next, that truth was finally being served. Rebecca might still fight, but her power over our family was broken. What none of us could have anticipated was the shocking revelation that would emerge during Rebecca's testimony, a truth so unexpected it would force us all to reevaluate everything. We thought we knew. The courtroom fell silent as Rebecca took the stand. Despite everything, she looked composed in her navy dress, hands folded neatly in her lap. But when questioned about her previous marriages, something changed. They're irrelevant, she snapped, her carefully crafted image slipping. Ancient history, Thomas's lawyer pressed on. Did you inform Mr. Lindstrom of these previous marriages before your wedding? Rebecca's eyes darted to Thomas. It never came up. So you deliberately concealed? I did what I had to do. Rebecca's voice rose sharply. Do you have any idea what it's like to start with nothing, to have no safety net? The judge leaned forward. Mrs. Lindstrom, please control yourself. Rebecca took a deep breath, her hands trembling slightly. My parents died when I was 17. No insurance, no savings, nothing but debts. I was alone. I felt a surprising twist of empathy. I hadn't known this about her. I worked 3 jobs. To survive, Rebecca continued, her voice steadier now. But it wasn't enough. Then I met Gregory. He had money, security. So yes, I married him, and then systematically isolated him from his family and drained his accounts. Thomas's lawyer added. Rebecca's laugh was bitter. Is that what he told you? Gregory was controlling, suspicious. When I finally left, I took what I needed to start over. She straightened her shoulders. I didn't tell Thomas about my past because I wanted a clean slate. I loved him. Her voice softened as she looked at my son. I still do, Thomas, despite everything. I watched Thomas's face carefully, saw the brief flicker of doubt. Rebecca had always known exactly how to reach him. But then the lawyer presented evidence of Rebecca's relationship with Eric Chambers, texts, emails, hotel receipts. Her affair had been going on for nearly 2 years. You claim to love Mr. Lindstrom, yet you've been planning to leave him for months, the lawyer said. You purchased property in New York without his knowledge. You attempted to flee with his children. Are these the actions of someone who loves her husband? Rebecca's composure finally shattered. You don't understand. None of you do. She turned to Thomas, desperate now. I was securing our future. The money, the apartment. It was all for us, For when you finally stood up to her. She pointed at me. Thomas looked genuinely confused. What are you talking about? Your mother, Rebecca cried. She's always controlled you. Always been between us. I was waiting for you to choose me, really choose me, over her, the courtroom murmured. I sat frozen, stunned by the depth of Rebecca's delusion. Rebecca, Thomas said quietly, my mother has never controlled me. She's never tried to come between us. She sold her home to help us buy ours. She's supported us in every way possible. She's turned you against me, Rebecca insisted. No, Thomas replied firmly. Your actions did that. The rest of the hearing passed in a blur. Rebecca's testimony grew increasingly erratic as her carefully constructed reality crumbled. By the end, even her own lawyer looked defeated. The judge's ruling was decisive. Thomas received primary custody of the boys. Rebecca was granted supervised visitation and ordered to undergo psychological evaluation. All assets were frozen pending a full financial audit. Rebecca was barred from leaving the county until all legal matters were resolved. As we left the courthouse, Rebecca stood alone on the steps, her sister having already left to prepare a room for her. For a moment, she looked small and lost. Not the confident manipulator who had controlled our family for 15 years, but a frightened woman whose carefully built facade had finally collapsed. Thomas hesitated, then approached her. I couldn't hear what he said, but I saw Rebecca's shoulders slump as she nodded. They spoke briefly before Thomas returned to me. What will she do now? I asked quietly as we walked to the car. Stay with her sister until she figures out her next steps, Thomas replied. The boys need stability, so I told her we'd stick to the visitation schedule. He sighed. Despite everything, she's still their mother. I nodded, admiring his compassion even after all Rebecca had done. 1 year later, my living room was filled with laughter as Jamie and Ethan played a board game on the floor. Thomas was in the kitchen, preparing dinner, something he discovered he enjoyed in the months since the divorce was finalized. Much had changed in that year. The financial audit had recovered most of the money Rebecca had hidden away. Thomas had sold the house, moving to a smaller but cozier home closer to my apartment. Rebecca, after initially fighting every court order, had eventually accepted a settlement that allowed her to keep a portion of the assets in exchange for a clean break. Her affair with Eric Chambers had ended shortly after he discovered she'd been named in his divorce proceedings. Last we heard, she'd moved to California to start fresh, a pattern she seemed unable to break. Thomas stepped out of the kitchen, wiping his hands on a dish towel. Dinner in 10 minutes, boys. I watched him with pride. The past year hadn't been easy, but Thomas had emerged stronger, more confident. He'd returned to the man I remembered from before Rebecca. Thoughtful, self-assured, full of gentle humor. Mom, you're staring, he said with a smile, sitting beside me on the couch. Just thinking about how far we've come, I replied. He nodded, his expression turning serious. I never thanked you properly, you know. For what? For not giving up? On me. For being brave enough to confront Rebecca when I couldn't see what was happening. He took my hand. If you hadn't frozen that account when you did, who knows where we'd be now? I squeezed his hand. You would have figured it out eventually. You're stronger than you think. Maybe, he conceded. But I'm glad I didn't have to do it alone. That evening, as I watched Thomas with his sons, patient, loving, fully present, I felt a deep sense of peace. The inheritance of truth had come, at a high price, but it had freed us all from Rebecca's web of deception. The boys still had difficult days, still missed their mother sometimes. Thomas still had moments of self-doubt, still questioned how he could have been so blind for so long. And I still felt twinges of guilt for not acting sooner, for not finding a way to help Thomas see the truth before so much damage had been done. But we were healing, slowly and together. We were reclaiming the family bonds that Rebecca had tried. So hard to sever. Grandma, will you play with us? Ethan called, holding up the dice. Of course, sweetheart, I said, joining them on the floor. As I settled in beside my grandsons, I caught Thomas watching us, a gentle smile on his face. For 15 years, Rebecca had worked to keep us apart. Convinced that my relationship with Thomas somehow threatened her. She'd never understood that love doesn't divide when shared. It multiplies. Later that night, as Thomas walked me to my car, he mentioned that he'd been encouraged to start dating again. I'm not sure I'm ready, he admitted. I still feel. He trailed off, searching for the right word. Wary? I suggested. That's natural, after what you've been through. He nodded. How do you trust again, Mom? How do you know someone is who they claim to be? I thought carefully before answering. You pay attention to actions, not just words. You move slowly. And you remember that real love never asks you to compromise who you are or cut yourself off from people who care about you. Thomas considered this, then smiled. Good advice. I'll keep that in mind. As I drove home that night, I thought about Rebecca's whispered words at that lunch table a year ago. If it weren't for you, this family would have a much better life. She had been wrong. My presence hadn't damaged our family. Her deception had. By freezing that account, by finally standing up for myself and for Thomas, I hadn't destroyed anything worth saving. I had simply revealed the truth that had been hidden for too long. And that truth, painful as it had been, had ultimately set us all free.